The Cessna came in on a Tuesday afternoon with a cracked exhaust manifold, a bent landing strut, and a transponder that had been reading wrong for 6 months. Ensign Dare Whitlow pushed it by hand through the fence line gate at Nas Keldon, the way men push things they can't afford to lose. And he asked the woman behind the workbench if she had time to look at it. She didn't glance up right away. She was torquing a fitting on a fuel line with a precision that looked casual and was not. When she set the wrench down and finally turned, Whitlow saw a woman in her early 30s, dark hair pulled back, a smear of hydraulic fluid along her left forearm, eyes that took in the Cessna the way a doctor takes in a patient. She walked around it once. She crouched at the strut. She straightened and said the transponder wasn't the transponder. It was a grounding fault, 2 feet forward of it. She said she could have it done by morning. Whitlow thanked her and told her he'd be back at 0700 to settle the bill. She went back to her workbench without answering. He'd heard about the shop from another ensign in his squadron, Voss Aircraft Repair, the small one out by the fence. The woman who worked alone, and who charged less than anyone else in the county. He'd expected something modest and functional. What he found was immaculate, every tool in its place. A grease-stained copy of an airframe technical manual open on the counter, cross-referenced with handwritten notes in the margin that were denser and more precise than anything Whitlow had seen outside a graduate program. Photograph on the wall, small and sun-faded, of an aircraft carrier somewhere at sea. No name on the shop, just the work. He came back at 7 the next morning. The Cessna sat on the tarmac with the sheen of something newly understood. The strut true, the exhaust clean, the whole aircraft carrying itself differently, the way a thing does. When the thing that was wrong has been fully corrected and not just managed. He walked around it twice before he said anything. She was already at the bench, a logbook open in front of her. She did not turn around. He asked what he owed her. She said nothing, which took him a moment to parse as an answer. He said he had to pay her something. She'd worked through the night on it. He could see the empty coffee cup and the angle of the morning light, and he understood what a night in a shop was like. She said the plane was her grandfather's. He said yes. She said his grandfather had done a tour in Vietnam in a Huey, and that she had seen the tail number in the logbook when she opened the cowling, and that a man who flew in one of those did not owe her a bill. Whitlow stood there with his hand still on the wing. He was 22 years old and had been a naval aviator for 11 months, and he knew when he was outranked in a conversation, even if he couldn't explain why. He said thank you, and she nodded, and that was the end of it. He thought about it for 3 days. It wasn't the money. It was the margins in that technical manual, the density of them, the authority, and the way she'd named the grounding fault before she'd even lifted the cowling. It was the photograph of the carrier. It was the way she had spoken about the transponder problem, not as a diagnosis but as a correction, the way someone speaks about a thing they have spent years fixing at much higher stakes than a civilian Cessna. He asked around the base. A senior chief petty officer at the gate knew the shop, knew the woman. He gave Whitlow a look that carried weight without carrying an explanation, and he said that some people do what they do and don't ask for the receipt, and that the ensign should leave it alone. Whitlow did not leave it alone. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. He went into the public maintenance records for the airfield and found Voss Aircraft Repair listed as a vendor for minor contract work going back 3 years. He went further and found almost nothing. A name, a certification number, and a file marker that read sealed and would not open for him. He pulled the airframe certifications on record and found them current and extensive, the kind of portfolio that took a long time to build and a longer time to earn. He found licenses that covered aircraft he would not have expected a civilian shop on a county fence line to touch. And he found one thing that opened without resistance. A maintenance log from a training command up the coast, 8 years old. And in the column for supervising his inspector, the notation read L. Voss Ironsky. He brought that to his commanding officer before he fully understood why. The CO looked at the call sign for a long moment. He made one call. He waited. He made a call, and this one lasted 4 minutes. And when it was done, he set the phone down on his desk and looked at Whitlow, the Way senior officers look at junior ones when they want to be sure the junior one is paying attention. He said, back and tell her the Admiral would like to call on her at her shop tomorrow morning at 8. Whitlow asked who the Admiral was. The CO said, one who was her wing commander on the second deployment. Whitlow drove back to the fence line shop that evening. The lights were on. She was still working. He delivered the message through the open door, and she set down her tool and looked at the middle distance for a moment. The way people do when something arrives that they have been waiting a long time to not expect. Then she picked the tool back up and said she'd be there. He didn't sleep much. At 7:45 the next morning, he pulled up to the fence and stopped the car because the road was blocked. Not by accident. 7 naval aviators in flight suits stood in 2 lines on the tarmac, outside Voss Aircraft Repair, dressed and still and facing the shop. The sunrise was behind them, and it caught the wings on their chests and made the whole line shine. A portable PA system stood to one side, and a Navy staff car was parked at the fence, and Rear Admiral Harlan Cord stood beside it in his dress uniform with his cover under his arm. Lena Voss came out of the shop at 8 o'clock exactly. She had cleaned up. She wore a plain dark jacket over a gray shirt, her hair back the same way it always was. She stopped on the step and looked at the line of aviators, and then at the Admiral, and she did not look surprised. She looked the way she always looked, like someone who had long since decided that composure was the only answer worth giving. The Admiral nodded to the officer beside the PA. The citation was read aloud. It took a little over 2 minutes. The Whitlow, standing at the edge of the tarmac, heard phrases that rearranged what he thought he knew. The youngest woman to qualify for carrier flight operations in the FCA-18 Super Hornet. 2 combat deployments, the second over a contested strait when the mission had gone severely wrong, and 4 aircraft had been lost, and she had stayed on station and covered the surviving crews until they were recovered. The Navy's carrier landing accuracy record, still standing. The Distinguished Flying Cross, awarded in a ceremony she had not attended because she was already out of service by the time the paperwork cleared. The last line of the citation named her call sign, Ironsky. The word went out over the PA and came back off the hangar wall, and the 47 naval aviators on the tarmac came to attention as one. Not because anyone ordered them to, because the call sign landed the way a true thing lands, with a weight that people recognize even when they have never heard it before. Admiral Cord stepped forward. He held the Distinguished Flying Cross in both hands. He said, "This should have been pinned 3 years ago," he said. "I am sorry it took this long, and I am glad it did not take longer." She stepped off the step and stood before him, and she let him pin it. She looked directly at him while he did it. The same level eyes she had turned on the Cessna, the same steadiness she had given to every aircraft and every problem in that shop for 3 years, not one of which had been beneath her. When it was done, the Admiral stepped back. He saluted, the 47 aviators saluted. She returned it with the clean precision of someone who had rendered the gesture in harder places than this, and the tarmac held the silence the way a cockpit holds it in the moment after a difficult landing. The danger past, the cost known, the aircraft down and safe. Whitlow lowered his hand last. He wasn't sure when he had raised it. He stood there in his flight suit with his arm coming down, and he understood. Now what the margins in that technical manual meant. What the photograph of the carrier meant. What 3 years of free repairs to veterans' aircraft meant. Given by someone who could have named her price and collected it 100 times over, and who had chosen instead to give the thing she was best at to the people who would never know why. She shook the Admiral's hand. She nodded once to the line. Then she went back inside the shop because there was a propeller assembly due by noon, and she had told a man she would have it done. And Lena Voss did not leave work undone. The aviators began to break formation, in 1s and 2s quietly, the way men leave a place where something real just happened, and there is nothing left to add. Whitlow stayed until he was the last one there. He stood at the fence and looked at the open door of the shop, and listened to the sound of tools on metal, steady, unhurried, certain. And he thought about all the things he had assumed about the woman behind that workbench, and how none of them had been wrong exactly, and how all of them, laid flat against the truth, had added up to almost nothing. He turned and walked back to his car. He had his own work to get to. But he left a different man than he arrived. Which is the only thing anyone can honestly say is owed. When someone like Lena Voss decides to give you her time,